Hey gentlefolk, my name is Malte Krug. Welcome back to another episode of All About Keys. The June issue from exactly 40 years ago is the first one in the Keyboards magazine's short history so far, with a special feature handling the then brand new, misunderstood, and for most musicians of the day unaffordable technology: sound sampling. These new sounds were everywhere in pop music, and some were already overused even then. I'm looking at you, orchestra hit. This very colorful cover seems to indicate what most people expected by sampling: getting better imitations of real instruments. But as we all know now, sampling spawned a lot of new music genres nobody thought of in the early days of this technology. Let's check out the rest of the magazine. It starts as usual with the content list, and here you can see that they collected test reports of brand new sampling units for this issue's special feature about the subject. The letters to the editor, side by side with a nice colorful ad for the Oberheim Matrix 12. Ein neuer Traum, a new dream, it says, and it was. Still is for some. Just a few pages of news. An article about Bill Sharp from Shack Attack and his gear, and 2 pages of new released records with some interesting entries. Followed by a few pages about new recording and production equipment which got presented on the annual AES convention, Audio Engineering Society, that in that year was held for the 3rd time in Hamburg. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but these down here were, for example, Sony's latest offerings. Analog reel-to-reel recorders. These 2 here on the left are stereo versions. The 5003 offers an additional center timecode track, but this one up here is a digital stereo reel-to-reel machine. Trevor Horn might have used 2 of these or a similar model for extending songs for the 12-inch maxi single mixes without losing sound quality. Or maybe the deck down here, the DMR 2000 digital master recorder, which used U-matic tape cassettes. These are the ancestors of the DUT recorders from a few years later, and similar products by other well-known brands on the other pages. And here we have the special feature about sound sampling. And it starts with a walk through history, how working with recorded real sounds has been dealt with in the past before modern electronics made things a bit easier. Starting off in the 1950s with musique concrète and experiments with recordings on vinyl records. Then, after moving to magnetic tape, using rotating tape heads for breaking up the connection between pitch and length of the signal, which is a pretty clever solution to realize pitch shifting or time stretching. Of course, the mellotron is mentioned, the analog ancestor of the modern digital samplers, which has individual tape mechanics and recorded tapes for each key of the keyboard. They were widely used even as sound effects sources for audio plays at the BBC. And then we finally get to the modern digital samplers and an overview about their functions and a bit of technical background. A deconversion, the methods for and the side effects of real-time transposing in regards of sound quality and realism, that these side effects create their own sound aesthetic that went further than basic reproduction of instruments that already existed, is not mentioned here. Having that foresight would have been a bit much at that point in time, I guess. Of course, they mention the memory problem. The memory into which samples get recorded, I mean. Memory space has been very expensive then, and still was a decade later. Prices dropped with the wide availability of home computers and standardized memory chips. Solutions they mention here are data reduction through dynamic compression and expansion, and of course the method of looping. Unnoticeable loops in samples were the holy grail of proper sample manipulation. The idea that you can use looping for drum grooves or other phrases had to manifest itself first, but it didn't take that long. And right at the beginning, about sampling hardware, they hit us with one of the most expensive systems, the Synclavier. The technical specs of this machine would soon be outdone by the next generations of much cheaper digital samplers coming up in the latter half of the 80s. Here we have the Soundkönig sampler. I already mentioned it in one of the earlier videos, but this thing never got released. According to the feature list, this unit would have been a great machine. For about 20,000 Deutschmarks, by the way. Today that would be roughly the same amount in euros or dollars. I think the Clownwork audio operator suffered a similar fate. The only photo I could find was from an ad in this magazine. The GreenGate DS3 is a combination of a plug-in card for the Apple II Plus or IIe computers and the accompanying software. And it cost only half the price of its Soundkönig for 1.2 seconds of sampling time with a resolution of 8-bit. A pretty hefty price tag for this, I would say. The Kurzweil 250 Rompler can be upgraded with a sampling unit, which works together with an Apple computer as well. And here we get the first sampler ever coming out of Japan, the Akai S612. Retail price of just below $1 grand, in $1985 of course, and they call it an attractive price here. It can only hold one 12-bit sample, has a static low-pass filter to get rid of some unwanted high frequencies, but other than an LFO, there are no means of altering the sample. It's 6-voice polyphonic, and those two faders on the panel can be used to work very intuitively on the loop points. No other sampler ever since had these. No mass storage in the basic unit. For that you would have to buy the floppy disk unit, which used 2.8-inch so-called quick disks. I'm going to show those when I demonstrate the successor of the sampler, the Akai S700. The Korg STD2000 is not a real sampler but a digital delay, and sampling is just a side effect and came handy to get the new magic word into the adverts. The one sample it held could be played monophonically with a MIDI keyboard. The rest of the magazine contains also tests which doesn't have to do anything with sampling. The sequential multitrack, the successor of the 6-track synthesizer, didn't sell as good as the company hoped. Their range of cheaper synthesizers for the mass market and for computer sequencing didn't get picked up by the pros who were used to the Prophet 5 and Prophet 8. And so a lot of money and reputation got lost. They gained some back with their upcoming sampler, which I will show you in a few months. You remember last month's giveaway? Here's the full-blown test report for it, the Oscar. The monophonic analog synthesizer contains 36 patch memory slots, an arpeggiator and a phrase sequencer. Its filter has 6 different switchable characteristics. It's a nice machine with a unique design and good sound. And the sound buzzer is back, containing sounds sent in by readers. In the second part of the DX7 programming workshop, Hubertus Maas explains in detail how to achieve string-like sounds on the DX7 from scratch. And here's the patch sheet again. This time we get 2 different workshops about home recording. The first teaches us about different impedances and the importance of using the proper inputs on a mixing desk or recorder for the various sound sources. The second one tells us about peripheral gear in the side racks of a studio. In this case, compressors and companders, and the special use for the latter as noise gates. The basic music theory workshop covers the 9th interval again, this time for major chords, and suggests how to voice those. Plus new chapters of the usual suspects of workshops, but for the first time a full piano transcript of a song, and an accompanying workshop with the drum computer patterns. The flea market section is already 3 times larger than last time. And now, the main event of the month. Another milestone of gear that got produced in the 80s. A machine that made the new hype and modern sound producing method available for more regular musicians. The Ensoniq Mirage digital sampler. Coming from an American company nobody ever heard of before. A sampler for approximately $1,700 sounded like a bargain compared to all those Synclaviers, Fairlights, PPGs and emulators with price tags like a car or a house, and so it sold in droves. Of course, some technical compromises had to be done, but let me show you what they did at the machine. I'm using the rack version of this breakthrough of a sampler, but to show you basic handling and some sounds, it makes no difference. And as far as I heard, I'm not missing out a lot by not using the keyed version. The keyboard doesn't have the best reputation. Like the magazine did, I will break this presentation into 2 parts, and next month I will show more sounds and how to actually sample. I will show as well how to edit in detail, do sound looping, and using the so-called analog processing with filters, envelopes, and so on. As you can already see, one of the compromises to cut costs is the user interface. The display is just a 2-digit 7-segment LED type. What you can't see from the front panel are the inner technical specifications. I will show them on screen. I mentioned earlier that in those days memory chips used to be very expensive. So another cost-cutting measure in this machine has been to reduce the memory amount compared to the large and expensive systems. Not megabytes, gigabytes or terabytes, kilobytes. The mass storage device in the Mirage is the floppy disk. Unlike the Akai S612 I showed earlier, this is built in. The Mirage was capable of holding up to 16 samples at a time, divided into 2 banks of 8. Each bank in best resolution contains roughly the recording time of 2 seconds. All the sample sounds you will hear in a moment will have to share those 4 seconds. If you want to have longer samples, you have to reduce the sound quality by reducing the sample rate. The founders of Ensoniq came from Commodore computers and developed their own chip for this, which contains basically the whole Mirage except for the analog parts of the sound generator. They will use it again for their debut synthesizer ESQ1 a year later. I will go more into detail next month about how the various digital tools can get used to clean up your samples and regain some valuable memory space. But when you're done with those, shaping the sounds into playable instruments is not so different to your old good friend, your analog synthesizer. Only that your oscillators can produce whatever sound you like, rather than just the regular synthesizer waveforms. When you start the Mirage up, it tries to boot from the disk, which in this case is a floppy disk with 360K of memory. It's one-sided double density. Later floppies were double-sided and high density, which resulted in them having a storage capacity of 1.4 megabytes, but never with the Mirage. Again, these only do 360K. Due to the display, you have to deal with a lot of abbreviations while handling the Mirage, so having the manual around comes handy at times. This one just means no disk in the drive. The Mirage is loading its operating system from floppy, and so it needs a disk in the drive to boot at startup. You might want to store your own samples at some point, but in the beginning you were forced to buy empty pre-formatted floppies from Ensoniq, because the Mirage operating system doesn't include a formatting routine. They changed that later and released a special boot disk which just contains a tiny operating system, and the only thing it can do is formatting other floppies. Every sound disk can also contain the OS, so whenever you're losing your operating system disk, you still have a lot of others. The Mirage does not only boot, but it loads the first instrument from the floppy as well, so you can start right away. In case of this floppy disk, the holy grail of what everybody was looking for when buying a sampler in those days is loaded: the sound of an acoustic piano. I'll come back to that a little later. The Mirage came with this parameter reference card, so you don't get lost or always have to consult the manual when dealing with basic functions. The Mirage always shows parameter 21 after the initial boot up. Let's check what it is. Master tune. Possible value from 0 to 99. For changing the value of the selected parameter, you hit the value button, and with these buttons here you can increase or decrease the amount. An edit fader would be helpful in this case. The dot at the bottom of the display is not a comma, it indicates if you are changing the parameter number or the value of it. More for all this in the next video. But now let's listen to some sounds. There are special load buttons, so you can load the upper or the lower bank independently. So coming up with split sounds is easy. So when I hit the upper load button, it says load upper in the display, of course. Same with the load lower bank button. But to load the full bank, I just hit either one of the load buttons followed by the other one, so the display shows LA. Load all. Then I hit the number of the bank I want to load, plus enter. Like I said earlier, a sampler was used to do things that regular analog synthesizers couldn't. And the piano was one of the most sought after sounds to get a proper copy of on stage. If you are used to sounds of nowadays gigabytes large piano libraries which stream directly from disk, use no loops and have multi-sampled layers of various dynamics, this of course will be different. Here we have a maximum of 16 samples, and I'm not sure they actually use that many all the time due to the memory restrictions. To get the short samples into a playable instrument, they used the filters and envelopes to mimic the original behavior of the sound that got destroyed with the looping of the samples. So this behaves quite natural. Not only the volume changes, but also the sound the harder I hit the key. If you ever compare this to so-called acoustic piano sounds from analog synthesizers, or then modern DX7, this is already much better. By today's standards, this piano sound is mediocre at best, even by the standards from then, compared to a real acoustic piano, I mean. But you had it, and it was miles better than what you had before coming from an electronic keyboard. So let's load some other sounds. Load all again, number 3. That is, as far as I remember, the electric piano. This is actually not too bad. It's dynamic. The filter's working again. Okay, more sounds. Let's see what we have. I'm going to give you now an example of a crappy sound set. Those are the drums on this. It's called rock drums. There we go. It's loaded. And something else you can load are short demo sequences into the Mirage's notepad sequencer with which they want to show off the sounds. This is not good. I don't know who did that. This is one of the worst hi-hats I ever heard. I don't know how anybody is supposed to play this key layout. Well then, these are some of the worst drum sounds ever. There are also some nice electronic drums. Yeah, we needed some Simmons. That is really 80s. The orchestral percussion is actually pretty good. And the gong sound is not too bad. And of course they had to loop it. So now let's see how this holds up against the typical DX7 sound. I prefer the DX7 in this case. Let's check the Latin percussion set with the sequence. So even the factory sounds were not always that good technical-wise. These are pretty noisy, for example. Now for some strings. There definitely is some mellotron vibe. And it seems to be only one sample. Those are crap. The gong is actually really good. You get the point. I really like some of these sounds. Yeah, there are better ones, but I still like it. Well, you know where those come from. These are only bad sounding chords, but the lead is okay. And the modulation wheel blends into feedback. How about some more strings, maybe? Very Khachaturian and mellotronic. Nice. It sounds like coming from the music of an old Alien vs. Predator game on the Atari Jaguar console. I know, I'm old. Now for some brasses. I told you most of these examples are imitating real instruments. I'll come to synthesizer sounds next month. Very dry. And these trombones here, when I played them yesterday to check them out, they reminded me of my first sampler ever, the Casio SK1 and its rum brass sound. I gotta compare them at some point. Let's get some Indian vibe. These are actually good. And a harp. That is not too far away from what a DX7 could do. But for the glissando, we have a proper sample. And it's only one sample, and of course the tempo changes with the pitch. Reminds me of Marianne Koch. Sorry, that's an in-joke about a German TV ad from the 1970s. Yeah, I'm old. Harmonica. The LFO vibrato is not very good. That sound played up here is not too bad. Come on, don't use the modulation. When you hold it, then the loop kicks in and it's gonna turn a bit dead. Okay, full pipe organ and organ positive. I don't need these sounds very often, but once in a while, they were pretty good coming from the TX-816. Looping happening. But I like the third sound much better. Ambient drums. With this, they sampled some 1980s sound aesthetic together with the raw sample, meaning in this case, the then omnipresent gated reverb. Okay, so this is showing a defective disc now, but it still plays whatever I loaded before that. Well, yesterday I had the bass drum as well. Let's try again. Yeah. Wherever the crash is. Well, the upper bank is broken on this floppy disk. I gotta fix that with the disk image I have. And as the last example, sounds that no synthesizer could do, those are spoken vocals. Da, da, da. Somehow I always liked the aesthetics and grittiness of two low-tuned choir samples. And we got other variations as well. But the last one is actually the best. Oh, come on, this disc worked yesterday. Well, to make the best of it, this is a good example how it sounds if you try loading a defective sound into memory which isn't properly overridden. The bank in the lower half is working. Whenever this happens, you should record that because you won't get it ever again. Ah, now it worked. Just gotta put some proper room onto this. Not bad, but the demo, I hope that doesn't hit some copyright claim, shows off the sound much better. So as you could see, not even Ensoniq came up with a very good sound set in the beginning. That could have been due to lack of experience, but my guess is that they needed to get the sounds for this sampler ready in a short amount of time to present it at the Musikmesse in Frankfurt in the spring of 1985 and become a sensation that it was. Let's check out next month what we can do with the sampler that has been a major turning point among all those others we got in the early 80s. So far for the first part of my presentation of the Mirage. Ensoniq has always been a bit behind with RAM sizes in their samplers compared to the respective models of the competitors, but managed to come up with excellent sounds no matter what. And don't get me started with the demo songs for the EPSs or the ASR10, those were really great. Nowadays we would use more memory just for one snare or bass drum, and back then they put in a whole piano or Rhodes. When you dive into the Mirage and use its advantages, the full analog part for the sound editing for example, you'll get some really good sounding results out of it, which you won't have to hide even nowadays. More of this in detail next month. Also, I will show some editing software for the early home computers which got released during the following years for avoiding the Mirage's user interface. Thanks again for watching. Please hit the like button if you like this video, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you won't miss the second part of this video next month. See you again soon on All About Keys.